We talk so much about protecting our energy, but what if we could actually amplify it instead of just protecting it? Imagine having bonus energy coins just landing in your lap, boosting your energy when you thought it would just be another one of those days that you're trying to get through. That's what we're looking at today. Almost all advice I can find focuses on conserving energy. But if you're neurodivergent, have an autoimmune condition, or just suffer with fatigue, is it possible to shift our focus to amplifying our energy safely and intentionally? I'm Becky, and as somebody with both a chronic illness and autism, energy is something that I spend a lot of my time thinking about. I have to monitor it, I have to manage it, and sometimes I want to try to amplify it. Is that even possible? Many of us find ourselves stuck in energy debt. And I'm not talking just about those of us who are neurodivergent or chronically ill. I'm also talking about anyone who is creative, ambitious, trying to make things happen in a world when it all just feels like it's falling apart sometimes. There always feels like there's so much to do, but how can we do it without crashing? If you've ever felt like however much you rest, you can never quite refill. Or if you feel like you're always focusing on maintaining just enough energy, but never really living, this video is for you. Today, I'm breaking down some of the science and my own lived experience of ways that we can top up our energy bank. Plus, I'll show you my own personal energy bonus list. Let's get into it. Over the last few weeks, I've been deep diving into the subject of energy and energy budgeting. And as I have been focusing on that more and more, what I've realized is so much of what I think about is how am I just gonna get the energy to get through the day? And frankly, I'm kind of feeling a little bit tired of that. Thinking about energy depletion is depleting my energy. And I need to focus on some of those things that actually feel positive. But I do want to caveat this, and I know that if you're somebody who struggles with energy like me, that we do have to spend time making sure that we have enough energy. We do have to say no to more things than we say yes to. And we do need to spend time looking after our energy. But that's not what today's video is about. What are those things that make us excited about life? That when we do have a little bit of energy, we can invest it in those things and they might just amplify our energy even more. Now, I appreciate that you are probably not going to hear anything brand new today, but this is your permission slip to invest in things that are important to you. This is my way of saying, I get it, and you do deserve to live as much of a life as anybody else out there. So first of all, I just wanted to quickly examine what energy even means. In almost all the research that I've looked at, energy is a self-reported measure, unless it's to do with things like nutrition, burning calories and the energy associated with that. So there's that side of it, but I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking more about your own energy. See, it's talked about as vigor or vitality, but just that feeling of energy. More often than not, if you look into the research on energy, what you actually find is a lot of things about fatigue, about energy depletion, and we're all too familiar with that, right? Unfortunately. So we can have different types of energy. We can have physiological, so that's kind of how our body is, how it's responding. We can have psychological, all about that mental energy. We can have emotional energy, and we all know that feeling of it being depleted. And when we're able to actually be very resilient and cope with big emotional things. And social energy. I mean, when I say we have social energy, the royal we, that's the one where I'm not sure I'm ever going to have an awful lot of energy. Maybe one day, maybe if we continue these deep dives forever, we can figure out a way to find me some social energy. But the interesting thing about energy is that the way we think about it, certainly for me, the way I think about it, and like I said, this is backed up by a lot of what I was reading across the different research papers, is that we know it better by the lack of it. We understand it better when we think about what it is to not have energy. We know it better when we think about what it is to not have energy than we do when we're trying to understand what it is to have energy. To have energy is to be living in that state when you don't notice that you don't have energy. So it's a really hard thing to define. A lot of the time that feels like we're focusing on sorting out the problem of not having enough energy, but there's very little about enhancing quality of life. And there is very little data out there about what quality of life means in the context of having an autoimmune condition, being neurodivergent. And although some of the things I did find said that those with autism have a lower quality of life than those who don't have a diagnosis. When you're in the midst of it, you don't really think of it, right? You do understand that you're missing out on things. You understand that there are maybe difficulties that are stopping you from doing things that other people seem to be able to do really easily. But you also just go, well, I'm living my life. I'm doing the best I can. So it's easy to spend a lot of time just thinking about all those day-to-day habits, routines, etc. that you have to just stick with, because if you don't, then things are going to be incredibly difficult. Quality of life is something that comes up in this discussion. So I wanted to just give the WHO's definition of the quality of life. This is the World Health Organization's definition of the quality of life. The individual's perception. That's what it starts with. That's key. It's about how you perceive your own life. The individual's perception of their position in life in the context of culture and value systems in which they live. So it's your own perception, but that's influenced by the cultures that you're in, the people around you, your own experiences of the world. And in relation to their goals, expectations, standard, and as concerns as they relate to the individual's physical and psychological health, personal beliefs, social relationships, level of independence, and salient features of the environment. That's like a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But essentially, I do think that first bit is the crux of it. It is about your own perception of the life that you're living. And therefore, it is so contextual. And I just think about, especially as an undiagnosed autistic person, your context, your identity, the things that have influenced you for many, many years of your life take on a totally different meaning after you get your diagnosis. So what does quality of life mean? And as I've been making this video, I've been thinking a lot about acceptance and acceptance of who you are and your circumstances. And honestly, that makes me feel, I'm gonna dig deeper into that in another video, but it's hard to think that, oh, to have a better quality of life, I have to lower my goals, I have to lower my standards, or do I just have to shift my goals? They might be different goals, different standards, but perhaps they're not lower, perhaps they're just lower in some people's versions of success. When it comes to adding energy amplifiers into our lives, then pacing and balance seems to be the thing that comes up the most in terms of making sure that you can incorporate things that you really enjoy, that light you up, but that you are conscious of the fact that you might also end up with an energy hangover after doing those things. Do you prioritize recharging, or are you able to find ways that you can invest a little bit of energy in order to get even more energy back? Let me know in the comments. Something else that's come up as I've been digging into this is the difference between rest and energy amplification, and they're two different things, and I've alluded to that already. Rest is that thing that we need, all people need, obviously, in order to recover and to recoup that energy that we may have used up, or to gain the energy that we need for future tasks, activities, to be a spark. It might be about inspiration and motivation. Those things are, again, lots of things that I've been thinking about as I've been making this video. As I go through the rest of the video, I'll talk more about what things are energy amplifiers and what things are energy protectors. And I think that those two things can sometimes go hand in hand. And the research certainly puts those two things hand in hand in some cases, but not in every case. And I know that if you are autistic or you're dealing with a chronic condition, then you have heard a million things from people already that say, have you tried yoga? Have you tried sleeping more? hang on a second, you seemed to be fine the other day. Are you sure there's even anything wrong? You're probably just normal. Everybody needs to sleep after doing X, Y, or Z. And the reality is, as I've done the research, there's a lot about yoga and sleep. And actually, I'm not dissing yoga because I actually do think it's really useful. But some of this today is going to be about just exploring those things. And it's almost a bit of time for you to just sit down and explore what it is that works for you or doesn't work for you, what you agree with from what I'm saying, what you don't agree with. As I said, my research on this has really got me philosophizing over all sorts of different things. So hopefully it's an interesting thing for you to be thinking about, even if some of these interventions seem like really obvious and you're like, well, they don't actually make much of a difference in my life after all. So later on, I am going to share the one activity that I stopped doing, but that actually brings me so much joy and energy, and I've tried to find ways to bring it back into my life. So keep listening and I'll share that with you a little bit later on. So let's get stuck into what the research says. So probably the most important thing for amplifying your energy is sleep. So is that a protector or is that an amplifier? It's both, obviously. And there's so many benefits to sleep. If you haven't read the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, then I suggest that you go back and read that book or listen to it. It just tells you all the benefits of sleep, and I know that you've heard that a million times before, and I know that you're probably also thinking, well, I struggle with sleep. So that's just frustrating to hear because I struggle with sleep. But sleep is obviously vitally important. There are different ways that we can find times to sleep, and it just boosts our energy. But sleep isn't really a bonus, it's more of a hygiene factor, right? But what I do like to remind myself is I'd rather sleep than go to a party. Rather sleep than do many, many things. And then I can use that energy for other things in my life. I do nap as well. So that's relatively new for me. Actually, post-autism diagnosis, I get my naps in. So actually scheduling time for naps is something that I try to do. And I don't always sleep during those naps, but I do like to relax during those naps. And again, there is data out there in the research that says a good old nap is going to make a difference for you. But let's shift our focus on something else that I found in the research, which is taking micro breaks. And those micro breaks can be anything that takes you away from whatever activity it is you're doing. Now, this is a little bit counterintuitive because especially if you're autistic or neurodivergent, you're hyperfocusing, that switching focus is something that takes up energy, and we know that can be really difficult in a working environment. But I'll come on and talk about hyperfocus more a little bit later. In a paper by Max Singer et al., they said that the data suggests that micro breaks may be a panacea for fostering well-being during work time. And the overall data supports the role of micro breaks for well-being, while for performance, recovering from highly depleting tasks may need more than 10-minute breaks. So in this particular paper, they were talking about 10-minute breaks. And the reason I bring this up is because maybe a way to incorporate some of your energy amplifiers and then taking some micro breaks might be the thing that allows you to do that without crashing. Examples of micro breaks could be going to the toilet or just going and standing outside for a few minutes, doing some breathing exercises. They do include talking to colleagues and helping colleagues and that type of thing. But this is something that you could implement if you're in the workplace. The next thing that I found in the research about energy amplifiers is social engagements, meaningful social engagements. So following COVID in particular, there was a lot of data that came out about the impact of social isolation and how that can impact mental health, fatigue, energy levels, and that socializing is something that's going to help you get out of those things. COVID for me was one of the reasons that I went to get my autism assessment, was because when I was in lockdown, I had never felt happier. I'd never felt more energized. I'd never felt like I had that weight off my shoulders of expectation to have to go and socialize. So it definitely, for me, socializing, I wouldn't say is an energy amplifier. There are times, and I will come on to that in a second. This is something that I think about a lot because I think there is so much pressure to socialize. It's something that I've often done against my will, and I've often thought, well, I should just do this because everyone says it's going to give you more energy and it's good for you and it's good for your career and it's good and it makes you a good person. Otherwise, you're that loner, or that you're a miserable person who doesn't want to go and hang out with other people, or you're a selfish person because you want your own time. This is the kind of voices in my head, and so I don't want to perpetuate that. And most studies do show that daily social enjoyment is going to increase your energy levels. For me, the fun has to be organized fun. I'm lucky enough in my life to have lots of good people around me, and it hasn't always felt that way. If I socialize around things like gymnastics, which is one of my hobbies, then that's the way I like to socialize best. That's how I'm going to get to know people. That we're focused on doing the things that we're there to do. We understand what each other are going through. It's not just about sitting down and talking. It's about getting stuff done. It's about enjoying those activities. One thing I can really resonate with is the idea that social exclusion or ostracization can lead to increased fatigue, and that it can really have impacts on your mental health. And I found myself in that place earlier in my career where I felt like I really didn't fit in. I was in a toxic working environment. I felt extremely excluded and very different from everybody else there. Felt like that was impacting my quality of life, my ability to work towards my goals, and my mental health was really heavily impacted. In that particular case, when I did meet people through, for example, going to the gym, I found that some of those social interactions with people who weren't toxic, who weren't just trying to bring me down, who were friendly and kind, that helped me. It was small interactions. It wasn't about spending loads and loads of time with people, but that was a really helpful thing to me. And that's something that I try to bring for other people if I can as well. Guess what else is on the research-backed list of energy amplifiers? Exercise, including yoga. There's been a lot of research studies that show that exercise will help you with fatigue. Sometimes, and in many cases, especially if there's autoimmune conditions, intense exercise is actually going to make things worse. So you've got to be quite careful about the level of exercise that you do. I'm really not telling you anything new right now, and I will tell you how that appears on my bonus list later on. Funnily enough, I did find a lot of data on Qui-Gon and Tai Chi, because apparently there are not only studies, there are meta studies on this because of the benefits of Qui-Gon and Tai Chi. But for me, they are not energy amplifiers. That's not something I'm like, I really want to go and do my Tai Chi today. I didn't dislike it. It was fine. But energy balls. But I would not say I was in any way really experienced at doing that at all, and it's not something that I am currently incorporating into my life. Another couple of really obvious things I found in the research. Diet impacts your energy levels. I am going to do a whole series on food and neurodivergence, food and autism, and food and energy, and how it impacts me, because food is a really big thing that I wish was a really small thing in my life. That's all I'm going to say about that. Your nutrition is going to have an impact on your energy levels, and that's really going to, on the physiological side of things, is massively going to make a difference. But of course they show that there's a lot of impacts on the other aspects of energy as well, your psychological, your emotional, and your social energy. That I think I set myself up for a very, very big video this time around. And it's lots of little rabbit holes that we could go down. The final thing, which I've sort of touched on already, getting outside really impacts energy levels. There's studies that show that light and your exposure to light, actually early morning daylight, which for me is definitely a thing. Early morning daylight is the most blissful thing for me. If I start the day like that, then I find I have more energy throughout the day. And obviously it's a well-known thing that in the summer months you can have more energy, and that SAD, seasonal affective disorder, is a thing where you feel like you have lower energy, where you feel like your mental health can suffer, where you can have depression based on the fact that you're not getting enough light. So that is an energy amplifier, and I've done a lot of work to try and shift my days so that I am up with the light and that I can spend more time in the daylight, and then I sleep better, and then I can wake up earlier, And it's kind of this knock-on domino effect. So the last piece is breathwork and mind-body connection. So doing breathwork is something that I do. I do Wim Hof breathing every single morning, and then I do yoga for about 10 minutes every day. And that's more physical than psychological because I actually watch YouTube videos while I'm doing it, so I'm not sure I'm getting the mind-body connection on that one. Maybe I should turn off the YouTube videos and do my yoga in peace, and that would help me with my energy levels, but I don't. So the science tells us that all the things that we already knew are good for us, and they're going to give us energy. But they still don't tell us about really sparking that joy and finding that energy, finding that amplification, finding that motivation and that inspiration, and those things that can shake off the cobwebs. So now I'm going to come on to my personal energy bonuses and what's on my list. And I honestly think these things are quite related to special interests and finding flow, finding hyperfocus. And do you know what I found in the research about that? It's all just about how we've got to be really, really careful if you're autistic or if you've got ADHD about hyperfocus, because if you do too much, then you're going to burn out. And it's true. I know that's true, but at the same time, I'm like, why can't I find anything positive in here? Let me have my hyperfocus. I think that's such a strength. So let me have it. It's an area of joy. It's an area by which I am walking towards success. It's helping me achieve my goals. So let me be hyperfocused. But you do have to be careful, and you do have to take those micro breaks, and you do have to make sure that you're not kind of going on over very, very long periods of time. I have noticed since I've been making YouTube videos more that I don't eat lunch every day, and I should eat lunch every day. And I can get to a certain point in the day and be like, oh, I wasn't hungry, because we're hyperfocusing. And honestly, I really want to do a video on the brain science associated with the flow state and how that works, because I find it fascinating. It's very exciting. So we've already said that energy is a subjective measure in most cases, because it's all about self-reporting. How much energy do you have? How much motivation do you have? The reason hyperfocus on special interests is going to give you more energy is because it's activating your internal reward systems. And I am one that is all about intrinsic rewards, not extrinsic rewards. That's another video I'm gonna do. This whole thing, just like, I'm sorry, just like I said, it's so many different threads. So I have to re-record a whole bunch of stuff because my camera ran out of storage. So you can improve your energy by aligning your effort with these intrinsic motivators. So I really do encourage you to focus in on those special interests. And even if you're not somebody who's neurodivergent, focus on those things that really interest you, that really light you up, that you feel motivated to do, even without external rewards. Oh, what's on my list? Well, the first one is fashion, aesthetics, photo shoots, getting dressed up, all of those things. This is something that I have loved since I was a child, and that my mum loves too, so it's something that bonds us together, but I was also exposed to from very, very early on, expressing yourself through the way you dress. I love colour, and very specific colours as well. You may have noticed that on this channel. And this is something that I can do even if I'm not feeling great. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely plenty of days when all I want to do is stay in my pyjamas or stay in my sweats. But getting dressed, especially if I am heading out to the office or going to meet with people, is a way that I feel that I can do something that gives me energy, even if all that energy isn't always there on the inside. And the fact that it can help you to express yourself so others perceive you in a certain way means that you don't have to give quite as much energy from the inside sometimes. And for those of us who don't love small talk, the things you wear are a great way to promote some small talk in a way that might feel safer. It certainly does to me. The next thing on the list is, I'm gonna say it again, exercise is definitely a thing that's really important to me. Not just because it's meant to be, not just because it's something I should do, it's something I really want to do. I feel so much better for it on the days when I can do it. And I've learnt to be much more accepting on the days that I can't do it as well. For me, gymnastics is the special interest. That's the thing where I'm going to put most of my time, most of my effort, and I really do want to progress in gymnastics. I'm 43 years old. That's not a normal thing to say, but it is for my friends. But in the general population, we don't associate gymnastics with being something for adults, but it's definitely something that I am very much into, and I want to continue to progress. The last couple of years I've really struggled in gymnastics, and that's meant my progress has been slower, and I don't get as much energy from it then, and that's been more difficult. So there's been quite a lot of persevering. But as one of my friends said, your gymnastics gets better when you're not feeling stressed and burnt out from work. And so that's one of the reasons why I've shifted my working life, so that I'm not feeling stressed and burnt out from work anymore. And my God, it feels good when I can do those skills that I haven't been able to do for a while. I literally said last night, the feeling of doing that is worth more than it's not worth more than any job. I need to pay for my home, but it's a really great feeling, and it's something that I want to continue to have in my life. So it's definitely a priority for me, and it really does amplify my energy. Other forms of exercise do as well, sometimes just because it helps me with my gymnastics, but also just any type of movement. My body feels good for it. In fact, you might then need to have more rest and more recovery time, and so I've tried to make sure that I build that in. When I've talked to people at the rheumatology hospital, they've been very clear that movement is a form of exercise for a lot of autoimmune conditions. So for when you can do it, do the things that you enjoy, do the things that work for you. They're not going to prescribe one type of exercise necessarily over another, because what's important to them is that we keep moving, keep staying strong, healthy, cardiovascularly fit as much as possible, because that's going to be helpful. I do other things. I do yoga sometimes. I do Pilates regularly. And one thing I love about exercise is doing led classes, as in when somebody else is leading them, because then you don't have to put in quite so much mental effort. Especially if I'm feeling very overloaded mentally, I really like just giving in to and listening to somebody else telling me what to do, and I just do that movement. I find that that's something that feels very restful to me and gives me energy, even if physically I'm moving quite a lot. And finally, the one that might be a bit more of a surprise to people who know me is music. That wouldn't be a surprise more generally, right? We know that music is something that gives people energy. I, this year, rediscovered singing, and it happened because I'd hurt my foot. I actually went to the hospital because I thought I'd broken my foot, but I wasn't able to walk on it properly for a little while, and that meant that I was driving my car more often. And while I was in the car, I was blasting out different songs and then singing along to them. And I used to sing all the time. It used to be a way I released a lot of energy, a lot of that discomfort energy that would go into singing. And so much so, it would really frustrate my sister, my neighbors. But this is something that brings me so much joy. Feels like freedom. I love to sing. I love to perform more generally, but that takes a lot of practice and a lot of energy and a lot of input. But just singing at home, and the data says that this releases dopamine. It helps with emotional regulation, and that's probably not going to be a surprise to a lot of people. But it was a surprise to me that it's something that feels so great, but I stopped doing it for a long time. And actually that's a pattern for me. I stopped doing gymnastics for 10 to 15 years, and when I went back in that gym, I just was like, oh, I feel like myself again. And there were so many reasons. I really genuinely thought I would never be able to go back in the gym, and I'm so happy that I've been able to do that. So rediscovering these things where the joy is, where you feel like you reconnect with yourself through some of these practices, is a really powerful thing to do. And then another little bonus is reading. I do love to read. And I found another study that said that both reading and listening to music increased your physiological arousal. So it's not necessarily a boost of energy through something like caffeine, but it does help maintain wakefulness and mental engagement. So isn't it funny that a lot of these things, and a lot of the challenge, the tightrope we have to walk, is that for many of these things, what they're actually doing is stimulating us to use more energy. But at the same time, because it brings joy, because it is going to shift things mentally for you as much as physically, they can actually really help be these energy bonuses, these energy amplifiers that bring that joy, that bring that inspiration, that bring that motivation. And I know it's hard when your body, your physical body, is then like, nope, we can't pursue all these things. But I think that's why I'm also trying to identify for myself, when I do have energy, what are the things I really want to focus on? And even when I have low energy, what are the things that I can do that are going to be those little boosts? The recovery plan is obviously really important, and I'm going to do another video that's on the recovery plan as well. So that'll be more part of this energy series. So your amplifiers might be totally different to my amplifiers. The key is to make it yours. I would love to know what those things are for you. I think we should create a list of all of the different amplifiers, and then we can pick and choose and try out different things that might work for us. And let's think about the context in which it works, because again, it's not necessarily about doing these things full out all of the time, but it's about having the little appetizers maybe to just help boost that energy. So I'd love you to try one of your amplifiers this week, see what happens, even if it's something very gentle, if you need gentle right now. If you're feeling a little bit more energized, then like I said, just make sure that you've built in enough time around those things to have some recovery. And I think that my big takeaway from today is that you can't hack your way out from an empty battery. We just can't. That's the reality. We know what we're living with. We know how difficult it is to suffer with fatigue, with burnouts, and it's a really difficult thing. However, you can find some of those moments to inject the things that bring you joy, that because you do deserve to be living your life. You do deserve to have those things that excite you, that light you up, and that give you a little bit of extra energy through doing them. If energy is a topic that, like me, you think about a lot, then do check in on some of the other videos in this energy budgeting series. And of all the threads I've gone down today, I'd love to know which ones you would like to explore further. Let me know in the comments, because I feel like this has inspired me to make a lot more videos, to delve deeper, to do more research, and to get even more philosophical. Hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.